Hey everyone, welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan along with Catherine Peterson, and each and every week we look forward to bringing you interesting guests and interesting topics. And this week will be no exception. In fact, I think this interesting guest has some very interesting topics to share with us. I'm excited to dig into those with our friend Ryan Wheelwright. You certainly know that because you read the show notes ahead of time before you clicked. But let's bring in our friend and our co-host, the fabulous Catherine Peterson. Catherine, always great to see you.
Thanks for being here, Ryan. And we're excited to spend some time with another guest. These are probably our favorite podcasts to do because we get to introduce you to somebody else that you may not already know. And that's always fun to bring and highlight someone from the mortgage industry who's doing some great things. So, with that, let's welcome in Ryan. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on here, Ryan. You know, for those of you who know Ryan's background, you may know of his tenure. He's a veteran in the mortgage lending space for sure, but he's had an interesting journey. You know, most of us that have been doing this 20, maybe going on 30 years, we've all got a little bit of a resume on LinkedIn, and Ryan's is no exception. But what's really great is this guy has been one of those really silent leaders, like the guy that is just getting it done in the background. I've watched him work in different office environments over the years where he becomes that really trusted leader in his environment. People come to him. He's drawing, or they're drawn to him because of his style and approach. And Ryan, I'm just really glad you could be on the show with us today because I want to share some of that with our audience and give them a glimpse of what it's like to be in the orbit and world of Ryan Wheelwright. So without any further ado, tell us just quickly, you know, where are you today? And then I'd like to rewind the tape a little bit. Where do we find you in 2025? What are you up to? And what does the world look like at Camp Wheelwright?
Well, so today I work at a place called CMG Home Loans, and I'm actually at home today. It's like my best place for video. I tend to do a lot of the video at home, but my office is in Kirkland, Washington. I currently manage a branch. I still originate. I Let's see here. You know, just over the last few years, I mean, I've been at CNG for a couple of years now. Before that, I was at a place called Homebridge. We were purchased by a company by CMG. And before that, I was at a place called Caliber, which was purchased by Caliber purchased Cobalt. And then before that, I was at Bank of America. Bank of America bought Countrywide. Countrywide was not my first place, but I worked at a smaller broker shop before that. So it's funny is for the longest time, I used to say I always had one desk and, you know, a couple of names just because of acquisitions as they went along. But I haven't even thought about how many acquisitions I've been through in my history. And it's funny that you're bringing up just the fact that being a veteran and like 25 years in, and yeah, I guess I don't necessarily think of myself as a veteran, but when you look at the resume, it's like, yeah, 25 years, I think quantitates that at this point.
Yeah, you reviewing that reminds me, you know, from time to time I run across people who have questions like, what do I do? What do you think? And it's always important to me to be able to refer them to people that I know have put on those shoes and they've walked in them. And you really have. I mean, you've been a part of quite a few transitions and not only survived them, but really have thrived. It seems like you found ways to level up. You don't seem to live in the past. You're always, you know, figuring out, okay, this is the new brand. How do we move forward? And there, you know, I think the resume supports that. You've done some really good work, Ryan. But you didn't just land in mortgage banking. That wasn't like, you know, hey, I'm a little kid, I'm 10 years old, and I want to be a mortgage banker. There's probably some steps in the journey there that I want to make sure we cover. Take us back in time, and I don't care if you were 10 or 5 or 15. When did a young man start to think about who am I and what do I want to be when I grow up? And what kind of thoughts were in your head as a younger guy?
Well, it's interesting is that I used to always like when it came to like my career goals, I remember thinking I wanted to work in a Fortune 500 company and get my business degree in those things. But my real passion probably started in just cooking food. Being a chef one day, I realized that probably wasn't going to make me rich and famous. So I kind of focused on more business studies instead. I've always had a focus in philosophy. I don't think anyone in the mortgage business has ever closed their eyes and go, you know, one day I'm just going to be the best darn mortgage originator in the whole world. That wasn't my journey, but how I grew up in a place called Mukilteo, Washington. There's Watertown. There's a ferry there. Uh, Normal, humble beginnings when it comes to high school, and going on to get my business degree was a little bit of a later path. I ended up, getting my college degree when I was 26 years old. I was a bartender for five. No, actually, that's a lie. I was a bartender for 8 years. I was a waiter before that, and I was in the restaurant business a long time. I originally got in the restaurant business probably because of my shyness. I thought that, just being in front of people, learning how to talk in front of people, that became, more of a skill set by design. And just being a bartender is kind of fun, talking to people and learning how to make drinks and all that fun stuff too. And a lot of people say that's a good transition into mortgage.
So there's first, I love that you put yourself in a position that was going to be uncomfortable. And I think you've done that today. So I'm excited to see people do that, see that bridge. But number two, my question is, what did that teach you being a bartender or being in the service industry that has really helped you today with where you're at now?
When it came to being a bartender, the main thing is just connecting with people, getting to them at their level, just having conversations with people. I think that's probably the thing that I learned the most. I guess the similarity is that a lot of times you walk in is like, oh, to be a great bartender, you need to know all the drinks. That's, I guess, the same thing as like to be a great loan officer, you need to know all the loans. It's not the case at all. Really, what it comes down to is connecting with human beings at their level, building relationships over time, including the people you work with. Like when you're a bartender in a restaurant like I did, you have to, have great relationships with, all the servers there, the managers there, everybody. And so that was, I would say, the big learning that I did with that. And just dealing with high stress. It's funny is just thinking about like a Saturday or Friday night, just dealing with all the components that happen in any given night on those things. And still, I would say the biggest connections I know when I'm stressed out of my job is because I start having restaurant nightmares. And anyone who's in the restaurant business understands what that means.
Yep.
Wow. Somewhere Gordon Ramsay is nodding his head and
Yeah.
loving the brand recognition while he's
I don't
at
know if
it. That's
anyone's
great.
seen The Bear, but there's this scene where they have this online order. They turn their online spigot, and all of a sudden the online tickets just start pouring out of the machine. And that just brings PTSD. I think for every restaurant person, they seem to have captured the stress of the restaurant business through that one scene. I'm like, wow, that was pretty impressive.
Okay, so Ryan, I know about your love of food and wine. I was well
Yeah.
aware of that, but it's really great to hear maybe where that comes from. Where was the segue? Where did the roads merge to where the track you were on in the restaurant industry suddenly became an opportunity to shift to this track with your business degree and then later into banking? What was the piece of that story that would be important for us to know?
That's interesting. It's actually a restaurant regular that I knew years before, way before I was a bartender, where he owned a mortgage company. And there was a couple of guys that worked in that place that, fast forward years ahead, where I graduated from college. It was 2001. No one was hiring because, of what happened in 2001. And so those management programs that I thought were going to be around, and I was playing golf with one of the guys, and I was just like, cum laude, business degree, no one's hiring, that kind of thing. And he just kind of was silent for a second. He goes, why don't you just come work for me? And I'm like, you're in mortgage, right? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah. And I'm like, I don't really want to be in mortgage because all my exposure was that people that worked in subprime at the time. And I didn't want to take advantage of people. I didn't want to, work with the people with really bad credit and that kind of thing. He goes, no, I do this thing called A paper. And I didn't have anything going on. So I go, and this was a Saturday. And he goes, oh, and I just thought about there. I just sat there with a little bit of silence. And I go, well, when would I check it out? And he goes, how about Monday? So Monday was the beginning of my mortgage career. And I had a stack of books. I remember that. And he said, start reading. That was my training. And it was pretty interesting journey from there. He was it was one-on-one. I worked out of a guy's house. He had a baby at the time. He would crawl into our office and go, no, daddy's at work. But I thought that was pretty fun to think about because that baby is now in college.
Time flies.
I might even graduated by now.
Yeah, absolutely. So that like beginning Ryan to the Ryan today, You've definitely come a long way. And one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on the podcast was you've kind of taken some leaps with some things that you're doing to build your personal brand. And so I kind of want to hear how that's developed since the beginning and now what you're really focused on, because I think that's something that our listeners really want to hear about.
Yeah. So what's interesting about COVID is that, it was very easy when it came to the mortgage business because there was just rates were so low. And I think all of us may have lost a little bit of our focus on our branding and who we were about because everything was just coming at us. Everyone wanted to buy, everyone wanted to refinance. Post COVID, uh, I don't know if everyone had an existential crisis, but I definitely did. And I started thinking about just, everyone was working virtual, being around people, being very, and just, feeling a little bit of loss post COVID. Whereas, like, what do I do now? Like, how do I represent myself? How do people see me? How am I going to re-engage with realtors in a way that's authentic, that will really resonate with them? How do I resonate with my clients? How do I true with my messaging? It took years to get there post COVID, but I do realize now that it probably came from just one day, just my sister-in-law was talking about social media, and she was in some coaching involved with it, and me almost turning 50 thought like the most ridiculous idea ever of getting into social media, like talking in front of a camera, talking, selling people a mortgage, on video. Like, all of those things seemed like terrible ideas to me at the time. What I realize now is it's more to it than that. Is how do you want to represent yourself in a way that's true and authentic to your clientele, in a messaging that's very clear and concise, and being truly figuring out your story, your messaging, and all of those things. That's where I think that the last 3 years have led me. And it's given me some room to be creative because, as being in the mortgage business for 25 years, it does get a little repetitive. And, getting good at mortgages is not something you probably, or it is something you learn very early on. After that, it's what do you find that's interesting, new? And at least that's for me, is finding new challenges, always learning, building my brand, finding ways to be creative. And I found that video has helped me with that a lot.
Okay, so now that makes me really interested
Yeah.
because again, I've known you before video and now after video.
Yeah.
What was the influence in that transition? I mean, it's interesting to talk about, your sister-in-law, maybe helping spur some of the conversation, but who was inspiring you? I mean, where did this come from that you said, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to fail and I'm still going to move forward. What were some of the inspirations for you to step into that real unknown and then continue to do it even when it was hard? Where did that come from?
I would say for sure that, I brought up my sister-in-law once, and Emily Board's her name. And I would say for sure she was probably the biggest influence because she said a few things that were very meaningful to me. One of them was that she wouldn't have gotten through 2022 if it wasn't for video. And I'm like, wait, you're doing this more than just for getting loans in business. She's like, she was talking about how much it's given her something to do. And it's interesting about humans is that when they're a little lost, they don't really know what to do. They don't want to do anything. And so, like, the idea of doing things that gave me direction made that feel very resonating to me, where I was like, just the actions alone was building me out into a new direction just by doing something very specific. She also, like, I found like she had a big network with the people that she was in coaching, which was called Ford Academy. And that's how I went to an event. I signed up around January of 23, and she started in 22. So it took a whole year of her talking about social media and Ford and all of those things before I finally begrudgingly went to sign up for my very first thing.
I want people to notice one thing you said
Yeah.
is that part of it is like that process of learning something new and
Yeah.
how that gives you energy in other areas, right? Like the process is part of like the amazing thing that gives us energy. It reminded me of a quote that you had on your LinkedIn by Lewis Carroll, about the road, and like if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, or something of that sort. But so I think that that's really important for people to think about, is sometimes taking on a project can seem crazy and can seem overwhelming, but sometimes it's that process of learning something new changes who you are as a person. And Ryan brought that up, but I don't want people to miss that, because I think that's important for our listeners to hear from what you said.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just the idea of hard work and doing something very difficult was very interesting to me, and just the idea of video alone. It's kind of like the idea of lifting weights. And I was like really excited to have a before and after picture of like the idea of like me trying really, really hard to lift something very insignificant in weight. And I was really like, okay, 3 years from now, I'm going to have those a lot more plates metaphorically on the bars when it came to video. And
Yeah.
I think back about the very first video I did. Not wasn't the first, but it was close to. It's the one that's most memorable to me, 120 minutes of footage for a 60-second video. And my hands were sweating. My mind went blank. I couldn't think about what I was talking about. And it was talking about something that was very simple to me, which was VA loans. And I couldn't remember anything. It was the exact reason why I knew I needed to be doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in that, right? And Catherine, I'm so glad you picked up on that, because
Yeah.
I think you are right. Our listeners need to connect with that piece of the story. Is we don't always know what we want. We don't always know how to do what's in front of us. And sometimes embracing the spirit of, I'm just going to find out, I'm going to try, I'm going to see what happens, can produce maybe some unintended benefits. You know, it's common to talk about unintended consequences, but sometimes in life we have unintended benefits, things that we really look back on and say, I'm so glad I did that. I didn't do it for this reason, but those were some of the benefits that came from it. And Ryan, I do see that in you, because yeah, I mean, I know you're a deep thinker, man. We've had some deep conversations over the years where I know for sure you think really deeply, which would not surprise me at all that you spent 120 minutes to record a 60-second video. And yet you didn't quit. You didn't stop. You didn't let that defeat you. You just said, okay, I gotta shorten that up, or I gotta push through that. And that really, I hope our listeners really hear that, because some of them are thinking today, well, I don't have whatever, the right lighting, I don't have the right camera, I don't have
Yeah.
the right voice, I don't have the right face, I don't have the thing to say. They'll come up with 101 reasons. You looked at all those reasons and said, okay, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's really all it was. It was a decision you made to figure it out. Powerful.
Yeah, it's the quote I'm thinking about is everyone wants the view, nobody wants the climb. And it's finding love in the climb again, which is really why I started doing it. And what's interesting to me is there's definitely times in the climb where you're like, like metaphorically, if you're just thinking about like your muscles are in pain. And for me, that video was all of those things in that climb. And there was no view of, I mean, maybe there was a view that I got from hitting some sort of mountain from doing that first video, but it's also a game of inches. And I think that the repetitions of just doing video after video after video, it's still not at what I would call, I've climbed Mount Everest by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely think that I'm enjoying the climb much more, and I'm getting closer to having a view of kind of where I want my brand to be, my delivery I want it to be. And it only comes from repetition, unfortunately. I wish there was some sort of easy button that was out there that existed where you could just flip a switch and like, boom, I am a natural born speaker and I can talk to this inanimate object that has a shiny screen on it. And I can just talk with confidence and remember exactly what I'm going to say and do it in the first take. I don't know if anyone can really do that, because the human brain, I don't know if is very helpful. Like there's a lot of thoughts that I think were built for our brains is to defend us against predators. And there's a lot of things that aren't helpful in our brain that help us to move in the direction we want to go. There's a lot, like you just said, all the talks, all the things that come up, or we're going to talk ourselves out of things. And I'm sure you do it. I'm sure I definitely do it. Where I'm often like, I'll look at a video after I post it. I'm like, gosh, not that good. But you post it anyway because you just don't know. And there's times of brilliance that you just don't expect, where it comes from just posting. And the ones that I find that the most interesting is, which has been the hardest for me, which I find is interesting in my own self-awareness, is talking in vulnerability in front of a camera to the public. Because like you said in the very beginning, is that I have been a guy that's flown below the radar for a long time, and or maybe said a silent assassin or something like that. But to some degree, just not a person that doesn't, have his hand up or just like a big billboard with my name on it, trying to be a guy with a lot of attention. So to me, talking about just life experiences or things that are hard is not something I generally do publicly. And what's interesting is the resonance and the most connection you get is when you do talk about those things. People do connect with you differently, which is the opposite of what I expected, which makes me want to do more.
Mhm.
Catherine, I like to call that the George Costanza effect, right? Just whatever your brain is telling you to do the opposite, and there's probably something worth learning from all of that. Catherine, this is really fascinating to me, but I want to dig more into Ryan your story of climbing that mountain. I think even though it was a metaphor, I still want to go back to the mountain.
Yeah.
When you're climbing, you're starting to see things from a different view angle. When you're down on the ground, you see this big rock in front of you, but once you get up on the mountain, you start to get a little bit more visibility to the terrain around you, maybe the next mountain, what's going on. Tell me about vision as you've climbed this mountain. What are some of the things you see today that 2 years ago you just couldn't see? And where does that help guide you in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting is so many people want to know when you talk about video in itself is, are you getting deals from it? And for me, I think we've already addressed this, is what, it's what it makes you, but also like it makes me, my vision is really digging into the one to many type idea, which where I see myself going from this point is not so much, of course, I'm going to still be talking to a video or talking to a camera and doing social media type stuff, but bigger thoughts, which it would be going to webinars, doing the podcast, theoretically doing more seminars, inviting speakers, having more eyeballs on you at one time. Because if you're going to spend an hour when there's 1,000 people looking at you and like they're doing something, watching you doing something of value, or you're doing a webinar where you're expanding your viewership by having the same conversation in a public eye, like that's something I'd really like to dig deeper into, is getting much more into the one to many type stuff.
I love that concept. And I think that that's going to be the concept of the future. So I think that I love that you're spending some time on that. And I'm excited to see that continue to expand for you, because I think this is giving you practice for that in a way. So I
Yeah,
think
for
it's
sure.
hard to see that next mountain without getting over this mountain. So like Michael said, it'll be fun to watch you do that.
For example, like a big mountain for me right now is that I wrote a negotiation class. It's clock hour certified. I have a school. There's 2 4-hour classes. And although it's all done, before at first it was like, I can't do the class because I don't have the clocks, the class is done. Well, now the classes are done and I still haven't done the class. So the next big jump is to have what's the right word? Courage to put it on the calendar, promote it, invite people to it. For the long time, I was trying to figure out ways to how to advertise it online and to get people to go to the webinar, start from the lead funnels. I'm going to attract people from a webinar to go to my classes, and from my classes, like, how am I going to do all that? And I literally started calling realtors and asked that question, which is, hey, I have these negotiation classes that I want to do, and I want to have people go to it. How, so you're a top producer. What would be interesting to you on social media where you'd go, hey, that sounds really cool, I want to go to your class? And they're like, well, what is this class all about? And I'm like, and so we started talking about it again. And I'm like, it's a little different because it's about psychological biases. It's not about like tactical knowledge, even though we get into tactics. And they're like, I'd go and I'd bring my team. And then I did that a few times. And I'm like, wait, I don't have to always do social. It doesn't have to be an either or. It could be all of these things, all the tools that we learned in the beginning of our career way before cameras, like, going direct to people, calling them, following up, having an actual Excel spreadsheet maybe of people going to just doing the basics don't disappear. They still exist. And I kind of laughed to myself. I'm like, oh, I just maybe need to go direct in this situation. But anyway, my point of all that is like, that's probably that's my next big step, is to do things of significance that way. There's some tax classes I want to do and so on and so forth, where I know I have a lot of knowledge that I can offer the world. It's just a matter of having the gumption to actually make the class, or to put it on my calendar and do the thing.
So there's two things I hope our audience is grabbing as they listen to you share that. One is some of these things you're doing today benefited from a couple of years ago, you saying, I'm going to listen to my sister-in-law and do more video, because video gave you a place to practice some of these skills, develop some of this courage, as you said, and ultimately be able to get it out there. The other piece is that, and I know this is simple, but sometimes we skip over, it's amazing how we will jump over boulders to find a pebble. You're really wise in saying, hey, some of this stuff is, I've just got to get it out there and maybe find out that I'm making it too hard. I just need to ask a simple question. And so it's, you're a golfer, Ryan. I've seen your game over the years. You certainly know how to manage the course well. And it's like shot selection. It's realizing I've got a lot of tools in the bag. I don't have to play everything with a driver, a 5-iron, a pitching wedge, and a putter. You could probably play a decent round with just those 4 clubs, but you've got some other clubs in the bag, and it allows you to try some shots that set up the next shot. And so you're playing the game strategically. That's what I hear you doing with brand and promotion. And I hope our audience is hearing that this isn't some, mystical process that only you have ever discovered and learned. It's actually, the beauty of it is you're trying things, figuring out where that leads, and then following through on what's next. There's a lot to be said for exactly the way you laid that out, and not making it harder than it needs to be.
Right. And what's also interesting to me is circling back to the idea of video itself is, again, the most common question I get about video in general is, do you get deals from it? And I brought this up a few times, but what's interesting is that I've gone from branch to branch with a microphone in my hand, talking to other, loan officers, talking about social media. I have lots of, appointments with realtors talking about social media. I have, I've literally done a few videos with realtors that they've been very afraid of doing X video. And I'm like, I'll do that with you.
So Ryan, we're learning a lot about you. We're learning a lot about how you've grown over the last few years in your use of video, and really putting yourself out there on social media, figuring out how that might lead to some other things you're doing. What's the one thing you would hope a listener today would pick up from you? What would you like to make sure the audience hears loud and clear when they've interacted with Ryan Wheelwright?
Is a lot of those voices that are, potentially could be excuses of not doing the things you want to do. And we can easily convince ourselves, I don't know if that's confirmation or bias, is if you believe it won't work, it won't. If you believe it'll work, it will. And we can find reasons both ways in order to do it. So the best way to do things is just to get started. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing ever at the beginning. Just start with something small, and those small things add up. Those actions will create a lot of confidence for you in a lot of different ways, and will help you on that journey, if that's the journey you want to do when it comes to video. It just starts somewhere. If we can get so stuck in making it perfect when we don't even know what perfect is, because the audience is the one that makes that choice.
All right. Well, that was, I think, the key to all of it. So with that, I'm going to get this episode closed out. Thanks, Ryan Wheelwright, for being with us today. And you can find this episode and all of our episodes on Spotify, and YouTube and Apple Podcasts. So please like and share. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we hope you learned something great. We'll see you next week.